Greetings everyone, my name is Buck Business, and today, after a long wait, I'm finally going to unveil my top worst 3 episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. So, out of the 3 that I've chosen, only one of them is subject to change depending on what happens in Season 7. As for the other 2, yeah, they're pretty much are on this list and probably will never be off of this list. But I will talk about more about what I would change upon further reflection, depending again what happens on season 7. But until then, this is my top 3 worst list. Now, before you automatically dislike this video, I would at least say allow me the opportunity to explain why my choices are what they are, as well as my top 3 favorite episodes, which I might do in a separate video depending on how long this turns out being. With that being said, here are my top 3 worst episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. Coming in at number 3 is a surprising choice, but my choice nonetheless, the Gauntlet of Fire. Now again, this is the one that is subject to change depending upon what they do in Season 7. Now by all accounts, this episode is surprisingly fantastic. Overall, Spike in all of Season 6 has been phenomenal and probably one of the better written characters for Season 6. But this episode suffers from something quite unique and something I haven't seen in quite a long time, as this episode, as I stated earlier, is phenomenal. It is so good that I actually think it's bad, and here's why. This episode deserves a two-parter, a follow-up. This, in essence, is something that I would like to see, or suspect to see, in something like The Last Airbender. That's how good I believe this episode is. This episode is fantastic, but it is so good that there needs to be more. There has to be something else. And that urge to see more makes me hate this episode so much. It is just so, it creates almost this empty feeling of there's just so much here that you just want to see so much more. So yes, I know that this is probably a very surprising choice, but again, it is subject to change. Now, if they do follow this up in Season 7, I would most likely replace it with 28 Pranks Later, as I felt that episode was weak. I felt like there was a strange hypocrisy within the episode that just didn't flow. I felt like they could have handled the actual topic of zombified ponies a lot better, but I think this actually beats that out for now. And it does so, again, in the strangest of fashions of being so good that there just has to be more. I want there to be more, and when that time comes, I'll be so satisfied with this episode. I just want to see more of Ember and what she's been doing. I mean, she just was crowned the princess, so I want to see a follow-up in how she's handling that actual job or something. There's just so much good here that, again, it feels like a season opener almost in that sort of regard, where it feels like there needs to be something more. But until then, this got stuck for my top 3 worst. Anyways, moving on to number 2. Coming in at number 2 for worst episodes, Dungeons and Discords. Now, for most individuals, I think most found this episode particularly to be on the more funny side. However, I don't think it's that funny. I mean, the third act is probably the strongest act, and I'll give the episode that, but the rest of the episode is just not. It just didn't do it for me. I think Discord was written particularly weak, and his references here, at least again in the beginning, don't fit the episode. They don't fit anything, and they just weren't even that funny. The Space Jam reference it didn't fit, and I didn't find it funny. His charade moment, again, I didn't find that either funny or even necessary. And by the time they get to the actual land, or within the game, that's when the episode actually gets good, for me. So this episode suffers from so much for me. And not only does it come from Discord's comedy that just doesn't land for me, but there's another point of disappointment in this episode for me, and that's with Big Mac. Big Mac is a character that we've seen talk a lot in a few episodes now. There was his flashback episode. There was the episode where he had his talk with Apple Bloom, and most prominently, the episode where he cross-dressed. So, here, he once again becomes a different character. And once he becomes that different character, I would have expected him to talk a lot more, taking on that role. But no, we don't get that, and we get a very disappointing role for Big Mac, where he just sort of says his casual yeps and nopes, and even a few yahas thrown in there. And that was extremely disappointing. If anything, this episode overall was more disappointing more than anything else for me. So much so that I went to the lengths of trying to figure out how I would want to fix this episode. That's how much I dislike Dungeons and Discords. The first thing I would fix is having Discord bring them into the game a lot sooner. Now, there's this whole complaint about, they spent enough time there and the episode's fine the way it is, but I disagree. I think they could have gotten to that world a lot sooner, and they could have poked fun of a lot more games here. We have Discord role-playing as sort of a Legolas character, and that reference makes sense with the episode. That I can understand. Other references, throw them out. They are completely unnecessary and to me unfunny. Throw them out. Get them into the world sooner. Next, have Big Mac talk a lot more, especially during the middle sequence. When they are in the world, have Big Mac talk. Make him make a reference to, let's say, Skyrim. I mean, he has the look. Have him do like a shout or something. Have him talk. Have him have a lot more banter with both Discord and Spike even. You have an opportunity to make fun of, say, NPCs, even though I think that's more of a video game thing, but I think it could fit here. What I would have wanted to see is them actually, Discord's magic affect Ponyville as an entire, have the entire role of Ponyville changed into this sort of world. Have the characters look like characters you would talk to or something, and, you could have banter there. You can have references there that make more sense for the episode. And you can personally bring the main six into the episode sooner and have them already being these characters, but actually believing that they are these characters. You don't have to have them leave. Or they can leave and then have these sort of replacement main six sort of play the characters that they're made to play. And you can really make fun of the class thing going on. You can spend a lot more time on that, especially during that middle section, And you could probably still get to that whole Squizzard thing at the end. They didn't really spend too much time in it within the episode, so you could relegate that toward the end of the middle, and then have them resolve it pretty much the same way that they did. It being real and the pain and all that stuff, and being disappointed, uh, telling Discord to leave, and then as soon as he does, makes the world disappear, and all the NPCs sort of disappear, and the main 6 NPCs sort of disappear, and then you could have the actual main 6 appear, and you could have that whole bit if you want to, and it would make a bit more sense since you would now be seeing the characters sort of twice now, and you would sort of understand their roles since, you could have given them at least one line each or something, according to their class. That would have been a lot more interesting for me, on top of giving, I think Spike could have been written a little bit better, but maybe not so. I don't know, it's debatable for me. I think it would have been a bit better, or at least more interesting, to see him portray his character a bit closer. He's a wizard, so have him talk a little bit differently or something. And again, Big Mac talking, I think that would have really helped the episode a lot, since he's one of the key players in this episode, and have that banter be really strong between the three of them. That's how much I think this episode could have been fixed, and all these sort of things could have been put in place, but as the episode is, it's just not that funny. It's just, the third act is the only strong act, and having only a third strong act doesn't serve as a good episode for me, and that is why I decided to place this at my number 2. So, moving on to my number 1 choice. And now for my number 1 choice, The Cart Before the Ponies. Now, this is an episode I believe is disliked by a majority of at least reviewers, and I am no exception, at least. So yes, I can agree with the majority of what most others have said about this, where the main 3 sisters were just written as if they were in season 1, and quite frankly, the timing of this is probably what I hate more than the actual portrayal of the characters. If this had been in season 1 before any of the sister episodes, I think this episode actually would have been fine, and that complaint would have been thrown out the window. I mean, they could have probably still put them all down at least one notch of crazy, and that would have been fine. Again, in season 1. But as this episode is, I don't think there's anything redeemable here, except the concept and the moral. Now, this episode, again, was so broken that I decided to try my hand at trying to figure out how I would fix this mess of an episode. So, how do you keep the moral of, listening to a younger sibling while also conveying the message of the older sibling is not listening, and so on and so forth, and it's also based on kart racing, and also make it a CMC episode. Those are the 3 things that I was trying my best to keep. So this is how I would want to fix this episode. First and foremost, I wouldn't say remove the sisters from the equation, rather have their role be a lot more insignificant, and actually make this more of a CMC focused episode, meaning actually introduce or have a character maybe that doesn't have a cutie mark. Actually make this a follow-up to that episode where they're, trying to figure out what to do with their cutie marks now that they got it, and then they go through that whole thing. Have this be the follow-up of them teaching about someone getting a cutie mark here. So introduce two new characters and have the pair of ponies, one being an adult or an older pony, and the other being a younger sibling. So now you have two new characters instead of the three older sisters being sort of the counterpoint to the CMC. So now the CMC can focus on helping this younger pony get his cutie mark, while also trying to convince the older pony to listen to the younger one or whatever. So have a lot more racing. You could have the entire middle section dedicated to the race. You can make more references to things that happen in a race. You have a lot of racing elements that you can take from wacky racing to Mario Kart. You have a whole variety of things you can sort of take from, as far as making a reference to, and making those references a little bit more obvious, but maybe not on the nose, but just a little bit there, present in the episode, at the very least. So you can dedicate more of the episode to the race, and you can have the older pony that's been introduced, have him not listening to the younger brother or sister, depending on which one you're gonna go with. And then they're racing, and they're probably cheating like Rarity was, and they're trying to, the older pony's trying to win, like how Rainbow Dash was trying to do. So you can kind of combine what the racers were trying to do in the episode, and again, just apply it to a new racer. I think that would have helped in the long run of not placing the blame on characters that should have not been so mistakenly season 1 written. At any rate, you have that, I had a deeper vision of what I would want to see, where, you have that intense racing moment of the CMs, like I don't know how we would get there, but you have the two drivers, the colt or filly and the older pony, driving, and they're in their lead, and you have the CMC now all together instead of being separated, and have some sort of way to get them to that point, and have the other sisters sort of taken out of the race somehow. You could have that cheating pony do something to sort of get the others out of the race, and have the CMC now stuck together. Now it's more of a focus on the CMC and the two other new ponies here, and you could sort of find a way to get them to get to the point of getting the cutie mark and all that. But I think it would have been a little bit even more interesting if here we get to actually see Scootaloo also being sort of the focus. And I think this actually would have made the episode with Gabby even stronger if they made this episode also about Scootaloo. So you have like this sort of now pushing of the Scootaloo moment here, and now you can bridge this episode to the Gabby episode, and you can have Scootaloo trying to hone in on teaching the pony. I imagined in my head that the two of them would actually also be flyers, and then you can have them sort of racing uphill, like have a different sort of track, so you're not anticipating a crash here, but you have the young pony sort of warning that they're going up a hill and then they're gonna fall off or something, I don't know, and then you could have a moment where they actually fall off, or they actually curve back into the race, and then the CMC, at least one of them, maybe even Scootaloo, since I said that she would be the focus, have her sort of fall off, and then have the younger pony sort of dive in and rescue her, and then you can, I'm sure that would probably lead to shipping, but whatever, that's fine. Have them finish the race together with the CMC in tow, and then they sort of push the main character, the other pony, aside, and they finish the race, and allowing the younger pony to get his or her cutie mark. And then, you can sort of drive home that message pretty similar. You can have that same message at the end, except have it with a different type of character. Again, the younger brother talking to the older pony and sort of delivering that message. And that's how drastically different I would make this episode. I mean, that's an entirely different sort of look in the episode. You could have more racing, you could have new characters sort of take the reins of the message, and I think that would have fixed most of what's wrong in this episode, to be quite honest. Since the whole competitive part of this race ends up not going anywhere, you could probably take out that whole first act of them at least talking about which role is which, and just have the sisters actually make carts according to their sisters. Just have it be that way, since they already know that they should listen to them at this point, and then you could just sort of go right into the race from there. How fantastic. And then you could focus more on that racing aspect. You could focus more on that whole introducing that new character, at least, if that's the route you were going to go for. And since this one episode took me so long to talk about, I believe I'll make a separate video for my top 3 episodes of My Little Pony Season 6. So with that being said, this has been Buck Business, and if you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, farewell, everyone.